Good evening, everyone. I am Pastor Sara McManus, and I welcome you to our church, Flame of Faith United Methodist Church, but mostly I welcome you to our Neurodiversity and Faith event. Here at Flame of Faith, we've been seeking to live into God's call in our lives about community, true community with all people, and to share God's love and to speak and hear in ways that reach through our differences, to speak to our hearts. So we are here to listen, to learn, and to live into God's incredible creation that is the diversity of humanity. So as you came in, if you didn't grab a notebook, raise your hand and I will go walk out and give you one. Actually, Elizabeth will grab you one if you need one. We got notebooks and pens. These are there is a order of speakers as well as some explanation from each of the speakers. I think everybody got it, but thank you. There is also a comment card if you want at the end. We'll have a big old box out there that you can put that in as well. If you would like a fidget, so there were a bunch of fidgets by the notebooks. Those are free to take. We also have a whole bunch of fidgets that we keep here at the church, as well as other aids for helping us to focus and to settle. So if you need one of those, go ahead and grab that. In the hallway, this direction, so out this door or around back by the bathrooms, we have a calming space. If things get overwhelming and you need to step out, there is some calm light, some calm sounds, that kind of thing, blankets. Feel free to use that space as you need. But as we turn to the night ahead, we have 3 speakers. And then after they have each spoken, they're going to have a kind of a Q&A. We'll bring some chairs up, let them sit and chill while you all ask them questions, or they ask each other questions as well. And so our speakers tonight are going to do far better at explaining and sharing their own truths about neurodiversity. And so I'm going to leave the storytelling to them and invite Hadlie Dahlseed forward. Did I say that right? No. Dahlseid, I apologize, to share her story.
Okay, I'm Hadlie. I'm 19 years old and I just finished tomorrow I just finished my first semester. Okay, so I almost finished my first semester of college. So a couple of disclaimers, I guess, before I start. I'm speaking for myself, and so I'll do my best to speak for people who identify as neurodiverse as a whole, but a lot of this stuff pertains just to me, so it might not pertain to everybody. That's just something people need to keep in mind. As well as I use the term Asperger's, autism, on the spectrum, neurodivergent, mental health, brain health, any kind of words interchangeably, just because it kind of makes things more simple. Okay, so since I was little, as long as I can remember, I have had different sensory and anxiety issues. And social situations were really hard, and I would always find myself rather reading a book or hanging out with my dogs than going to a birthday party or playing with a bunch of people. And throughout my life, I've went to different therapists and doctors and was diagnosed with sensory processing disorder, generalized anxiety, and social anxiety. I had separation anxiety when I was younger. And then in middle school, I did more doctoring and therapists and stuff, and I added OCD and depression to the list. But the biggest thing, I guess, was when in my senior year of high school, my mom found a place called Amen Clinics, and they do what's called SPEC scans. And being interested in psychology and neuroscience, this is super fun for me. And so it's basically a supercharged MRI that shows the different areas of your brain that are active and not. And so I did that. I got my brain scanned. So I have pictures of my brain. It's really cool. But that showed that I have autism. And so I can see on my brain, like the different parts of my brain that show this, as well as ADHD. And so I met with the doctors there, and they explained like mental health in terms of like your brain, in terms of how my brain works. And so this was just last 2 Januaries ago, so a little over a year is when I kind of had the, oh, that's what it is kind of thing. And so looking back on my life, I've realized like I can pinpoint different parts where, oh, that's where the autism was, or this is why I was like this. So that's kind of my life in like 5 seconds, I guess. And so I think the best way I'm able to describe what my autism is like is I feel like I was dropped in another country and expected to know how to speak the language and act the culture, even though I didn't know how, and nobody knew I didn't know how. Everyone expected me to just be fine, but in reality, I was like dropped in the middle of nowhere and I had no idea what I was doing. And so I kind of think of it as English might not be my first language in terms of how everybody else thinks, because I have my instinct and then I translate it to, oh, here's what everybody else says. So it's kind of, that's where some of the communication parts come in, as well as just I act different, and so that is how I describe it. For example, I don't understand what the term hang out means. I've never understood it. It doesn't make sense. That's an example. So the way I've described this to my friends is that in every social situation, I get really drained and really tired. Even if it's like with my best friends or just random people. So like I went to Valley Fair last summer and I slept for like a week afterwards because I was so exhausted because of all the sensory information and all the talking to people and everything was going on. The Valley Fair was just like overly stimulating. It was kind of like pouring a waterfall in a pasta strainer and expecting me to be fine. That's kind of how I think of it. So I have a couple of examples of like how my brain works. I think of it as seeing things through a certain lens. Sometimes I find I have bigger reactions to things than afterwards I notice other people do. So like I was sitting with my friends, one of my friends at lunch, and then she brought her other friends, and we were like getting to know each other, and they were talking about a show that I really like. Goes, oh, I really love that show. And that's like not how everybody else responded. They were just like, oh, I like that show. And so things like that are kind of have a difference with people. And so I feel like emotions really intensely sometimes. That was kind of an example of that. Sometimes another example is I don't really know what's normal sometimes, so it takes me a while, like after the fact, like I just said, to realize what's normal. In preschool, something that like perfectly described me was, this is when I had separation anxiety, and I would sit by the door and pick the glitter off of my shoes because I was so anxious and waiting for my mom to get back. I didn't want to play with anybody else. I was just like hyper-focused on when is mom getting back. Another thing is some people on the spectrum have different experiences with emotions than like normal people or neurotypicals. For me, as I've mentioned, I feel emotions really strongly. I don't always know exactly what they are at first, but I feel them really strongly. But I also think of what the most stressful thing is first. So a couple weeks ago, I was in my dorm and I was wanting to go home that weekend, and my mom was like, we were trying to figure out the schedule, and there was like a scheduling conflict thing, and so she was like, well, we might not be able to come home this weekend. I was thinking, oh, but I gotta get my laundry done. And like the response that I was trying to portray was, I want to go home to see my family and my dogs, but what came out was, I want to get my laundry done, because that's what was most stressful to me at first. And so I think it's important for people to understand, like, and my mom gets this, I care about being by my people, but I thought about the stressful thing first. So I think understanding different communication differences is really important, so you can understand people's intent and intention behind things. So I've explained some of the harder things about how my brain works, but there's also some good things too. I don't want anybody to have the assumption like this is horrible. It's pretty cool too. I think I see the world more beautifully. That's how I like to explain it. Another thing that is pretty helpful most of the time is I'm really stubborn. I'm super determined, but that translates into resilience. And I have gone through so much that I kind of am fine no matter what life throws at me. And so I think that is my biggest strength. Also, like, neurodivergent people sometimes are hyperfixated on super things where they get so, and me too, I get like super interested in one thing and like that's the only thing that I pay attention to. So like when I was learning about my brain, I would read books written by the main psychiatrist at ATEM clinics, and I have like a 70-page Google Docs of like all the notes, and it's like I was hyperfixated on that, but that's helpful too because I'm super passionate about things like psychology and neuroscience, and so that will help me moving forward in my education because I'm able to take my passion and turn it into something, I guess. For me, I have a super strong sense of self, and I think part of that is because I have autism, and like I never went through the whole change in high school thing. I was always myself, and I think that's because of my autism. Again, this is a new thing, so I'm not entirely sure. Yeah, and as I mentioned, I think I see things more beautifully, I think, than if I were not having the brain that I have. Now, how I think about faith is also different. I've kind of explained how I think about the world, but faith specifically, I've noticed I think more philosophically than other people, or just I think more in general. One example of this is I was in Sunday school when I was like 4 or 5 or something, and I remember the story of like the Daniel and the lion's den thing, and I came home from that like completely traumatized because, well, a couple things. One, I didn't want to believe that lions would like hurt a person because they're like cute cats, you know. So, and another thing is I didn't understand how people could do that to each other. I was so fixated on that doesn't make sense. Why would people do that? And so everybody else was just like, okay, story time, now let's go to recess. And I was like, no, this is a problem. The world is ending. Like, this is a horrible thing that happened. And I think about things like that with like current world stuff too. That was just like the first thing that I remember, where I was just like super overwhelmed by something that everybody else just wasn't. Another example of kind of how faith works into my life is I was baptized, which I think is cool because I kind of think of it as like opening the door to faith. And I'm super curious about religion. I have like a big stack of books about like all the different faiths and stuff, or religions, or all the different things. But I also think, you know, I don't know everything. So how can I say that I'm 100% this or 100% that if faith is a lifelong journey? So I, right now, call myself Christian. That's the best word I can use to describe what I believe, but I don't know what that's going to be like in the future. And so when all of my friends were getting confirmed, I chose not to. And that comes like the strong sense of self thing. Like, I was okay with that. That was a decision I made for myself. Cool. Because I felt like that would be locking me into something, and I really like learning and discovering things, and so I wanted to just do it my way. And so I think that's cool. That's what I chose to do. I think a way to summarize how I think about faith is I really believe that God can be found anywhere, but especially in nature. Like when I go to Florida and I walk out onto the beach, it's just I feel God's presence, things like that. Or in each other, sometimes when I'm sitting with my friends, I feel kind of like a more spiritual faith presence or within ourselves. I think that's kind of how I summarize how faith works in my brain. Also, I think I really like events like this where people bring in the person who they want to learn more about to be the speaker. So if you want to learn more about people who are neurodivergent, you let the neurodivergent people speak. And so I think with living through my life, I'm not an expert. I'm an expert on myself, but I'm not an expert on autism. But I do have some, I guess, advice I could give to people if I'm talking to like a miniature me. I think what has helped me the most is to find a person that I trust and who accepts me no matter what. And to me, that's my mom. She is my rock. And so I can call her randomly to just complain about something or say like, okay, I have to do this social thing, but I have no idea how. You're going to have to walk me through it. So finding a person like that is really helpful. As well as when I was learning through the ATEM clinics about autism in my brain, they actually mentioned that complaining about things is helpful. Because when you have autism, you kind of go through therapy differently. It's not necessarily the same. Again, it differs for every person. But she said that just complaining about things, or just like, I call it my brain dump. I just dump everything in my head, either in a journal or to one of my friends or my mom. That really helps, because then I can reset, move on. As well as what I've worked on throughout my whole life is recognizing things that are going to be harder for me, but also recognizing things that are going to be easier for me, and acknowledging that whether it's harder for me or easier for me, it's not my fault, it's not anybody else's fault. But also knowing what to do in those situations. So like, for example, if I'm really stressed about something, I know that I need to get my weighted blanket and put on music I like and turn off all the lights and just lay in my bed for a bit and reset and move on. Knowing yourself is really important, because then you can kind of deal with stuff that is harder or easier for you. Something else I want to mention is something that has helped my mom understand me is an author named Glennon Doyle, and she struggles with mental health things, and she is very good at describing life in a way that at least makes sense to me. So even if you don't read her, even though I really think you should, because everybody should, find somebody who is like the book out there. I noticed the Look Me in the Eyes book that's been recommended to me. Find something where you can read to understand if it's yourself or someone close to you. To me, that's Glenn, and I listen to her podcast to read her books. One of the things that I think everyone needs to hear that she says is that we're not broken, we're reacting appropriately to a broken world. And some of the things that she says like that really resonate with me. As well as learning about my brain through the ATEM clinics has been really helpful, but I also think that, everybody has a brain, so everybody can learn about things that they can do to improve their health, and ATEM clinics does a really good job with that. So I guess that's kind of what I would recommend for people. And the last thing I want to talk about is in those little booklet things. Well, first of all, I kind of summarized what I said because I think it's really helpful, at least for me, to, when I'm hearing someone speak, to see what they're speaking about, as well as I have little pictures on there. And so when I was preparing to speak, I was thinking, okay, how does everybody else think about neurodiversity or think about autism? And you always hear like autism spectrum. When you think of spectrum, you think of like the line, like linear. And while that might be how it's normally described, that's not necessarily the case. Autism looks more like the pie thing you can see there, and all the little different colors. And I think it's really important to note that each person, it's not that they have more autism or less autism, it's that they have a different experience. And so the one picture on there with like the colors in one representation in a way, and the ones with the other one, like we have the same amount of autism, just different symptoms, I think is a really important thing to understand. Because I was talking to John, and it's like a completely different perspective of it, but we have similar diagnosis and things like that, which I think is really cool. People need to understand, it's not a linear spectrum, it's a circle spectrum. That's what I've got.
Thank you, Hadlie. I now invite John David to come forward and to tell his story. And John is going to use... Sure. There you go.
Hello. Hello. Hold it right here and like, hey. Gosh, I could probably just go without it. Couldn't I? Like, is it about the same? Like, hey. No, I'm getting people saying that. Okay, I will. Gosh, I'm getting like chastised. Like, I just get up here and it's like, no, speak into the microphone. Okay, I will. I do apologize. Oh, goodness. Well, thank you. Thank you so much. oh, for that, it's like I was just, it's like it seems like I'm supposed to respond to and just talk to her, kind of like, well, yeah, this was going on and this is going on. And let me get this stool. And so I don't think about what I'm going to be talking about before I talk about it. I just show up in places and I start speaking, okay? First, I don't know how to be nervous about doing that. I was about to ask, is anyone in here nervous? Oh my gosh, I imagine some hands would go up. It's kind of like, and then I'd probably ask, like, why are you nervous? You're watching me speak. It's like, so yeah, I guess I'm supposed to tell the story of me, which is kind of sort of strange because I don't understand who or what that is. I talked to people about a symptom of autism spectrum disorder called alexithymia, okay? And I don't have a sense of self. I don't have a me, and sometimes I'll walk past mirrors and I'll be like, oh. It's like, oh, that's me. It's like, it's not all the time, but sometimes, it's just kind of like, oh, that's the person I am, and I don't know what I'm supposed to feel. And so people try and help me out with that. Like some people will say like, well, most of the room is, just really, they're really happy that you're here. So, and you ought to be happy about that. And then some people say you should feel a certain way. And it's like, hey, don't should all over me. I guess I'll pause for laughter there. And it's like, but yeah, the story, I guess, about me. Neurodiversity and faith. So our father couldn't make it tonight. And I say our father, I'm talking about the dad that I do have, but people believe I'm talking about God. And so I just go with that. I'm like, sure, yeah, that's who I'm talking about. Yep. But our father couldn't make it tonight. He's under the weather. And so I was sitting with him before I got here. And I said, okay, Dad, this is basically what I'm going to talk about. And I just did the whole conversation with him. And so he was offering me, I suppose, feedback. He's like, John, don't go into that much detail. You don't have to tell them everything. And I was like, well, so what am I? So he's giving me feedback. He's telling me, you could say this and you could say that. And I'd say, yeah, I'll be talking about neurodiversity and faith. And he's like, so what is neurodiversity? Do we all know what that is in the room? What was that? Thinking differently? Yeah, sure. So I had said to our dad, it's just brain difference. It's really what it is. It's just brain difference. And he's like, well, why didn't you say that? Like, I guess I did. And there is a difference between like neurodiversity and being like neuroatypical. And so I described that to him. And it's like, well, there's diversity, and then there's being one way within, or being different within being diverse, or divergent, And then he was just kind of like, what? Like, okay, well, I'll move on from there. And so I really ought to get to just the faith element of it, because I'm in this space, and I so ought to say that. I so ought to talk about that, because this is such an opportunity to talk about how I have taken some of the symptoms of autism spectrum disorder and implemented them in my life as faith, or I guess under the umbrella of faith, okay? And so I had just been talking about how this brain tells me I am the people I'm talking to, okay? And that's sort of mirroring. When you hear that term, it's like mirroring, basically. It's like my brain tells me I am you, that I am us, or that we are us. And it also tells me that I am that chair. And it tells me that I am, outside, that I am all of this. And not in some sort of selfish or egotistical way. It's that all of this is one, that oneness, okay? That's what my brain is telling me, that all of this is one. And I really didn't have the language for that. I suppose I could have pathologized some of it, I do believe is the word that fits there. It could have been really clinical and really medicinal, and now I'm thinking about commercials on television that list the side effects of something, and I'm going to stop talking about that. So, yeah, and so I bring that into my life. I guess I incorporate that oneness that's going on by really knowing that I am a part of the body, and as I was talking to our father, he's like, that's good. Yeah, talk about that. And I said, yeah, and like the Holy Trinity, that makes sense to me. And he's like, no, don't go there. I was like, but it's a great idea, even if people don't agree with it. It's like that oneness, being one, And he was like, no, just don't. John, don't. That was one of those moments. He's like, you don't have to go into that much detail. So really I ought to get to, okay, there's some of the humor. I suppose, golly, I was sitting there and I thought the first thing I ought to say is, I don't actually have autism. I just came here for soup. Oh, yes, it was. Yes. And it probably still is, wherever it is. Soup? As if it would answer yes. Thank you for that. That's kind of like, what is he talking about? I'm not talking about anything. Or I'm talking about everything. So what I told our father was that I really ought to answer a question, and that question is why? Why? Why did God make me this way? Okay, and I imagine some of us ask that question of ourselves, or maybe parents wonder, and I'm not, you don't have to say anything. I'm not fishing for anyone to tell a story besides, or with the story I'm telling. But that's just come up every once in a while. Why? Why am I like this? Why is this so hard? And our father, he got really quiet there. And I had told him I have the answer. I know why. And first, it's kind of like, well, do you think we're all supposed to be the same? Do you think that's what God wants? No. It's like, I've talked about it a little bit. It's kind of like, do you know about the Tower of Babel? Like, do you know what happened there? It's like he made certain that people were different, or that there was a difference. And that's something he does consistently, again and again and again, makes people different. Why? So they can make a difference. Okay? That's what we're supposed to do. That's why we're here. That is our purpose. And if you think about all the heroes, right, in the Old Testament, and I hope there's horripilation that's going on right now, and that's goosebumps, okay? If you think about the heroes like in the Old Testament, and I'll say heroes, okay? Because I don't even know how much time I have. I could look. Am I almost done? How much? I don't know. Anyway, yeah, I guess, okay, great. I shop at Walmart. When people say you're fine, I shop at Walmart. Well, thank you. It's just being silly. So yeah, you think about the heroes in the Old Testament, you think about the New Testament, the Gospels, and what is the question that all of them ask? Okay, and I said that to our father. I said that to him. What did they ask themselves, or what did they ask? And he said, why, God? Why are you choosing me? Why? They say the same thing. Why? And the answer is that they're amazing. They were made to be amazing. They were made to amaze and be heroic and do amazing things. They were made to be doers. And that's what we were made to be. Okay? Those of us who are, sure, neurodivergent. Those of us who are neuroatypical. Those of us who are kooky and quirky. And I'm so supposed to rhyme. And I'm resisting. I'm resisting rhyming right now. Oh, that's great. And I'm totally unmasking in front of all of you. I'm talking about the symptoms that are going on as they're happening. So I hope you all appreciate that, all right? Because it's tough for some of us, isn't it, to unmask? Because we don't even know what is a symptom and what isn't, because sometimes something's been modeled for us and we just do it, So that's why I'm saying that, and that's why I perhaps seem so unconventional or uncommon or atypical, and so I ought to. That's my purpose. That's why I'm here. I'm a difference maker. I'm a chain breaker. I'm a yay-sayer, all right? That's what I do. I let people know that something is possible, and that's what we're here to do. Those of us who are neurodivergent, those of us who are neuroatypical or outliers, okay? We're supposed to be in that wilderness a little bit to lead people in a certain direction, especially when they need it, the most. And so that's the answer. That's the answer to the question, why? Okay? You were made that way for a very specific reason. And it is so wonderful. It is so amazing. It's so blessed, that reason. And you're just going to change so many lives because of what you say. And you won't even realize it. We were just talking downstairs. Like so many people say, oh, like when you say something. Does that happen to you too? People are like, oh, like I didn't. Really? Like, wow. Whoa. And it's like, it's just a revelation. Hey, that's great. I didn't even think about that. But And my name is John, so I ought to revelate. But that's great. Shall we just play that song now? Who's that a-writin'? John the Revelator. So, so that's what we're supposed to do, okay? We're supposed to we're supposed to do the most good right now with the people around us, and we know how to do it. And some people, I guess, they're uncomfortable with that because we're transformational people, okay? We're not transactional, and we're not transitional, pretty much, but we're transformational. We grow things, we change things, we reach, we develop things. Things become bigger, things become better. Things become more around us. We multiply things, and that's what God does, all right? Is when you think about God and when you pray and when you worship. And I told our father, and he's going along with this, yeah, this is good stuff. Say that. And I said, yeah, when you pray, that's talking to God, and when you worship, you listen. And that's just something, I saw that on YouTube, and I thought that was pretty helpful, because I didn't know what one was and what the other one was, And so now when I talk, I'm constantly praying, that oneness, that goes on. If we are one, one part of the body, and I bring that up in classes, the oneness, and they'll say, how can we be one? It doesn't make any sense. And I was like, well, there's this pinky, and then there's this pinky, and they're not the same pinky, but they're connected, to one another. And so that's how they're one. And so I guess a person's probably thinking, is he saying I'm a pinky? Can I just be a thumb? I mean, index finger maybe? Oh, goodness. So yeah, with that oneness, I do believe I'm talking to God all the time. And I suppose I'm not saying every person I meet is God or is Jesus or something like that. I'm not exalting people. I think you get what I mean, is that it's a constant sort of fellowship and communion with something so much bigger than myself. And each person that I meet is so much, it makes it sound like I'm being self-deprecating, but to be so much bigger than me, to see the bigger picture in a way that I can't. And I just honor that, and I celebrate that about people. I see every human being as a movie star. And I guess I'm just a big fan of every single person that I meet. Everyone, So how am I doing for time? It's a good time? Is that it? We're having a good time. Oh, sure, but is it up? 3 more minutes? Okay, I haven't been looking at the time, and so I guess I could set this. Gosh, now I'm thinking about The Equalizer with Denzel Washington. Has anyone seen that? What was that? The first one? Yeah, so he's gonna, take care of business, and he'll just go, set his watch to see how quickly he can do it, or whatever, set the timer on his watch. That's not what I'm gonna do here. But I suppose, I can just talk a little bit about, so does that help people to hear that? It's like that why, because so many people wonder about that. Why? Why is this so hard? Because God knows that you can do it. God chose you to do it, and I talk about this a little bit. I do believe I've been called and not chosen, but I do believe God does choose people. I myself have not been chosen, and I don't know how to be sad about that, or bitter or rancorous or something like that. Now I'm thinking about all the synonyms I could offer for bitter, but I do believe I've been called to give so much because I'm so conscientious and so dutiful and so honest, and I suppose pure. And I post that on Facebook every once in a while, journaling, so that had come up. Oh, look up the word pertinacious, okay? Because what you were talking about, being stubborn and determined, that's what that word means, stubbornly determined. So I tell people that too, that I'm pertinacious. And they're like, will you just knock it off with those words? I had thought when I was smaller, that if I learned the big words first, that I would have to talk I would talk less. Because I'm saying the big words, so it's just covering more. No, no, I talk twice as much. Because I have to explain what that word means, And it's like, well, I'm just, golly, this event is so Brobdingnagian, it could make me lugubrious. Yes, exactly. There we go. And people are like, what? You know, and it's like, well, and I say the big words, I don't know, it's, even though I don't know what they mean, it seems like I've got, verisimilitude. So, we're appearing to be true. This is great. I've got some people laughing, and then I'd have to explain what those words mean, right? Like Brobdingnagian is just big, lugubrious is sad, and verisimilitude appearing to be truthful or real. So there you go. So that's an example of I learned the big words, and then I have to tell people what they mean. And so, everywhere I go, I attempt to make a difference, and I succeed too. I change things. I'm a difference maker. And I tell people in classes, and just like tonight, I suppose I could have opened with this, that we're going to go from impossible to difficult to done. That's what we're going to do. In this class, in this situation, we're going to go from impossible to difficult to done. And that's all I do, all of the time. And sometimes I watch Murder, She Wrote. Sometimes, I'll just put it on. I bought the whole series, so I'll just let it play. Have you seen Murder, She Wrote? Okay, so I'm getting a head shake. So I'd have to explain that. It's a murder mystery show, but it's totally implausible. It's impossible. I mean, that's impossible. She writes murder mysteries, this author, Jessica Fletcher. Oh, this is great. I'm describing Murder, She Wrote. Oh, goodness. We'll talk about it later. Okay. But that's how I make a difference. I fail in front of people all the time. And I was talking about mistakes. I don't believe in them. They don't exist. They're not real, like ghosts. And I'm going to repeat what I had said downstairs. And I say this in classes. I say this at events and lectures and presentations. I don't believe in ghosts either, because 2 words. You ready for them? Ghost clothes. Where do those come from? Where do ghost clothes come from? The clothes that ghosts wear. Like, where do they come from? And people are like, I don't know, they manifest them? It's like, have you ever just thought really hard and socks appear? No. And so mistakes, same thing. When you start to think about them, they're silly. They're just incredibly silly. And so in classes, we go from impossible, people say, this is impossible, to difficult, I'm having a hard time with this, to done. And it's like, oh, time's up. And it's like, but this was going so well. This is so much fun. And is time up now? Yes? Okay. Okay, there we go. So there you. Thank you so much. Thank you so very, very much.
Thank you, John. I really appreciate all of your words and both of you so far. Our last speaker for the night is Tiff Dorfman, and they're going to come and speak about their own story.
Well, hello, everyone. I am so excited to be here. I was the intern here 5 years ago. Hard to believe it was that long. So this definitely feels like home for me. So I'm so glad to be here. I'm so appreciative of our other speakers. Thank you so much for sharing your experiences with us. Now, this is such an important topic that we don't often discuss, and especially in faith spaces. Our stories are so important and such a powerful tool for connection. So I'm so grateful for this opportunity. So a little bit about my first experiences with neurodivergence. I grew up in a small town near Sioux Falls, South Dakota called Canastota. And in 3rd grade, 2 siblings, Stephen and Ashley, joined my class, and they both are on the autistic spectrum. Their parents joined my parents' Bible study, and Ashley and I became best friends. And I learned so much about the different ways that brains can function and that information can be processed. Ashley is a very literal thinker. Certain phrases and idioms that we commonly use make little sense to her, and she would often make hilarious jokes out of them. One day we were singing the Annie soundtrack. When we were singing Tomorrow, she asked me to pause the song, and then when Annie sang You Can Bet Your Bottom Dollar, she asked why in the world Annie would have a piggy bank in her butt. You know? And we still laugh about that one. That's one of the favorites. But she adds so much humor and different ways of viewing things, and I've learned so much from her. And in my own experiences, I have had trouble pinpointing exactly when or what specific things from my childhood pointed to my own neurodiversity. I was diagnosed as an adult just over a year ago with ADHD. I was quite driven in school, got good grades, so I didn't show a lot of the typical signs that people do in presentations of people with ADHD. But in college, I started to really struggle with being able to focus and getting things done. Writing is quite difficult for me, including this presentation. In all honesty, putting my thoughts together for this was quite difficult. There's so much going on in my head at all times, so many thoughts and ideas, and trying to put them on a page, my mind just goes blank. So tackling a research project or an assignment with multiple steps is quite difficult for me. I made it through undergrad eventually, but I feel like it was a lot harder than it needed to be. I think the worst part in my experience was comparing my experiences to other students in my classes. They seemed to be able to get things done a lot easier and quicker than I could. So I started to feel that I just wasn't trying hard enough. I felt that something was wrong with me because I couldn't do it the way that other people could. So I used to beat myself up about that a lot, and my confidence definitely took a huge hit. I didn't have the words or a frame to understand how my brain functions and what I could do to help myself with regular tasks and projects without being so overwhelmed. So during the first part of the pandemic, I, like so many people, ended up on TikTok. At first, I was mostly watching cute and funny animals, but eventually I found my way to ADHD talk. Specifically, a content creator called Katiosaurus. Most of her videos focus on adults with ADHD and her journey through understanding how her own mind works and what helps her. My eyes were opened to myself, and I was like, oh, yeah, I do that too. And so many things inspired me to explore this more about myself. And I had been struggling at work because I write sermons a lot. So I talked to my doctor and started an assessment to help me understand myself better and ways that I can get my stuff done. So a diagnosis with a bunch of letters or whatever might not seem very important, and it's really not. It doesn't change who I am. It just helps me understand myself better, and it helps me connect with other people, and then we can share our own experiences, and it's very empowering and validating. With ADHD, tasks that should be straightforward and simple seem daunting sometimes. It's like a constant swirl in my head of all the things I need to get done, so I jump from one to the other, and it feels like I don't accomplish them in the time that I could if I focused on them one at a time. Do you have the clip from the video? Okay, never mind. That's okay, not a problem. It's a video from Gilmore Girls, and she just jumps around from one thing to another. It sounds like you're familiar. It's just, she starts talking about writing a letter and how she can't because she's wearing a green dress, but she wished she was wearing her blue dress, which reminds her of Casablanca, which reminds her of the White House, and then Bush, and driving a hybrid car, and then riding a bicycle, and a unicycle, and then a unitard, monkey underpants is how she ends up. So that definitely feels like it represents how my mind works. As we know, neurodiversity can impact every aspect of life, from school, work, household duties, relationships, and faith. Traditional faith spaces and practices are generally geared for neurotypical people. And I love certain aspects of traditional worship, but I have so much trouble staying focused. There can be so many different stimuli happening, and sometimes that's overwhelming. And engaging with my faith, like in youth group in high school, I was taught very specific ways to engage with Scripture and to engage in a spiritual relationship with God, like quiet time, you might have heard of. We were taught to set aside about half an hour and be completely alone, no distractions, and just read Scripture or just pray. And I could never find a way to make that work for me. One leader that I had a step-by-step process, which is helpful for me. But I think overall, as a community of faith, we can do a lot better in listening to and engaging with people that think differently than we do, so that they can experience the community and fellowship and grow in their own faith. I have found that one way that is best for me to engage, whether it's in church or in lectures or conferences, is to have something to do or to fidget with. I have fidgets all the time, and I also cross-stitch or color. And one really helpful thing for me to do is to take notes. So when I grew up in church, we, as Midwesterners, generally sit very still and don't do a lot while we're listening. So I would type notes usually on my phone, but my parents sit in the front row of church. So everyone behind us could see what I was doing, and everyone thought I was texting, and they would make comments, and that's just not what was happening. Once they understood that I was taking notes, they were like, oh, okay, that makes sense. But I think as a community of faith, we can do a lot better in being open to other ways of doing things and to help others discover what is best for them. Everyone has their own experiences with their own context, and there is no one right way to think about your or another's neurodivergence. Some people do think of their neurodivergence as a superpower, or, as John mentioned, being able to see the beauty in the world better. And that's great. And the next person might not think of it that way, and that's okay too. And it's not fair for us to put on other people how they should view their own differences in how they think. Something might not work for me and might work for someone else, and that's okay. My husband, Curtis, has not been evaluated yet, but we are quite sure he has some kind of neurodivergence. Sara is nodding, she knows him well. Probably ADHD. Well, we have a lot of similarities in our struggles. Things that help each of us are very different. Especially early in our relationship, I would become very frustrated at times when things didn't get done in the time or the manner that I wanted them done. Once we started exploring our own neurodivergence and each other's, usually by sending each other TikToks, I began to understand myself better and him a lot better. So we are on a journey together with compassion in understanding how we can best navigate life. And navigating life, school relationships can be really tough and exhausting, maybe even overwhelming. And so having good support, like Hadlie mentioned, especially in a faith community, can really, really help. For me, needing specific accommodations, whether that was at school, definitely made me feel like I was a burden sometimes. And the more that we can do to normalize accommodations or different ways of engaging, the better we can help our neurodivergent siblings. And most importantly, being open and honest and engaging in conversation instead of jumping to prescriptive solutions, for sure. So here are a few things that I have found that have helped. The great thing about TikTok is, one, they're very short, so it can keep my attention. Two, other neurodiverse creators are able to share what works for them. So I have learned some different techniques and even bought a few products that have helped me. So I have discovered that I am quite sensitive to noise. So there are Loop Experience earplugs. These are all in the booklet. I have a resource list. And they filter out the background noise, but I can still hear like voices very clearly or music very clearly. So those are very helpful for me. I also have a neurodiversity focused timer that's a hexagon, and you rotate it to a specific time and then it just goes. So that's really helpful for me when I'm working. Then I set it so that I can focus on something for 15 minutes, then do something else for 15 minutes. That works really well for me at home as well. I'll talk through the rest of the resources. One of my seminary friends, Alexander, put together an autistic dictionary as a project for Autism Acceptance Month, and he describes it this way. It is a resource for both autistic and allistic people and is a collection of terms I wish I had known while pursuing my diagnosis. This list is created from a month of research, consuming testimonies, videos, articles, and other content. So that is listed in the resources. Another was the Autistic Self-Advocacy Network. That was one that he used for a lot of his research. And the Autism Acceptance, it's an online book that really helped him, especially when he was first diagnosed. There's a book called How to Keep House While Drowning by Casey Davis. She has ADHD, and on her website there is a resource tab, and she has a whole storefront for Amazon where she has a ton of products that have helped her, so definitely check that out. In terms of podcasts, I really appreciate that Hadlie mentioned Glennon Doyle. Love her podcast, We Can Do Hard Things. It's very good, so good, and her books are fantastic as well. Another podcast is I Have ADHD. She does coaching as well, so her website is there. And Katie and Eric's Infinite Quest. There is some strong language, I will warn you. They're very silly and fun and very open and honest and real. And there are some YouTubers that have helped me too. We were discussing earlier about women experiencing autism differently, and so these people, Purple Ella and Tyler Grant especially, focus on that and share their experiences as well. And that's all I have. Thank you so much, everyone, for being here this evening.
All right, I'm going to invite our speakers back up. We're going to have a time of question and answers. You can ask them questions. I can bring a microphone to you, or we can You can just loudly yell if you would rather. They can ask each other questions. We can do this however we want.
Did I leave a water? Yeah, I did.
You did leave a
There we
water
go.
right
I was
there.
going to drink some of that, and it's like, it was up here.
All right.
Okay, hello, check one. Hello, check one. There it is. Okay, great. So am I moderating? Is that what I can do that or something like that? I don't know. I don't know how to be nervous about it. I could just, like, hey, hi, everybody. Welcome back. So yeah, are there any questions out there after we've been speaking? I did think that we would have so many ideas just being up here together, about what it is that could be implemented or employed, while, oh, there's a question there. Shall I run to her? Okay.
I didn't have the speakers on, so I did hear most of it. But as the parent of a neurodiverse child, what is the best way that I can support him? He's 10. So as a 10-year-old, how can I best help him now?
Sure. Well, I didn't figure out I was neurodiverse until recently, but I've had symptoms like my whole life. So I think the best thing my mom does is just sits and listens. I can go on a tangent for hours, but afterwards I'm way calmer. I think that'd be the number one thing, just listen. As well as if it is hard for your child to explain things in a way that translates to how you can understand it, because that sometimes is a barrier with me and my mom. As I was saying, I think I said this up here, I can't remember. She read Glennon's books and then told me that helped her understand me. So if there are books about children or young boys who are neurodiverse, I think that would be another good thing you could do. As well as make sure that he understands that he's not different in a bad way. That is something that, sometimes people think it's assumed, but being told, I am loved all the time by my mom is really helpful, because sometimes I don't doubt that with my mom, but sometimes I doubt that with other people, and I think being reminded of that is, yes, you're different, but that's what's beautiful about you. I think that is another important thing. I think that's what I think of off the top of my head. Anybody else? Mm-hmm.
Yeah, all of that beautiful, for sure. The other thing would be to educate yourself as best you can. Lots of reading, yep. And listening to podcasts or reading some books and things like that. But definitely any normalization behavior that you can do, just normalizing everything, I think would be helpful. That's what my mom did too, that was helpful for me.
Yeah, and I was just about to talk about normalization, and so thank you so much for bringing that up. I guess thank you. I was about to say thank you to all of us, but thank you too for sharing, this event with me, because I know I can be a little kind of who is he? How did he get in here? So thank you for your patience with me, and yeah, I participated in an autism symposium a little while ago, and I got to talk to Dr. Temple Grandin, which is really, really neat. Do we know who that is? There's a film about her. So I'll just say that. You can see that film. She's written so many books, presentations. She's got a PhD, so check that out. And I got to ask her a question about being from a place. But anyway, so being a parent. Okay, one of the professionals had said you kind of have to bring the normal out of the child in a very kind of careful way, because some children will be like, so what's the right thing to do? What's the normal thing to do? And instead of just saying, oh, this is what normal people do. This is what normal is. And I had been doing this in classes, and I don't know if you two do this too, but I'd be like, no, I'm not going to tell you what it is, to build confidence too, that you have to rely upon yourself. And that's bringing out the normal. It's you have to, whatever words you call it, I'll go with you. I accept it, and I'll say it's normal, but you have to choose it, okay? I can't tell you what that is, And so that's something I'd been thinking about for a while, and hopefully that helps. And then thinking about, too, a fella with ADHD, he had said, remember this acronym, ABBA. And he had said, not the band, and do we know who the band ABBA is? Okay, because I was just about to sing Dancing Queen. And so he, well, yeah, I suppose we could play the song. And it's like, yeah, you can dance. I was so, yeah. Yep, no, it's fine. I blame myself. Why? Because I can take it. So always be activating is what he had said. Always be activating. You have these thoughts, just do something with them. Constantly be activating about them or make them active and not try and suppress them or, try and move on from them. Just get them out, get it out. Smash them together, move on. Keep going and going. So is that something that could be pretty helpful?
I was just thinking, if you don't tell the child what is acceptable socially, do you think that's better? Or it's better to tell them? Because I do believe the process of going to just discover it and know can, I don't know, some people can hurt them in a way, or, this can cause a lot of hurt in the future, So, what do you think?
Yeah, I think if I understand what you're saying, I think what I was working on, especially before college with my therapist, was making a list of all the things I'm going to have to do in college that are hard, because it's a big transition. And so I think, yes, there's part of I have to be willing to do things, but we made a list of all the things that I have to do. And then from that list, we said, okay, what are the things that I actually absolutely have to do? Okay, well, I have to take tests, but I can take those tests in a different room through the accommodations. That's the other thing I was going to say I forgot to mention. Work with whoever is at the school for accommodations, because there's no reason that you have to do things. It's leveling the playing field. I take tests, but I take them in a different room. And I have a time and a half, so I don't panic about the clock or things like that. So yeah, we made a list of things that I have to do. I have to take tests, okay, but there's a different way that I can do it. So understanding what the normal behaviors are, but also understanding which ones I don't have to be normal with, because, I don't always have to act normal. Like John was saying, he was unmasking up here, which I really appreciate, because that is really hard. So there's sometimes knowing when I can unmask and knowing when sometimes you just kind of have to deal with it or kind of just get through it, because that's kind of the path of least resistance sometimes. But yes, knowing what you have to do and what's normal, and also knowing when you can be you, I guess, if that made sense.
Oh, she's handing me the microphone. I'm just kind of that was really impressive, wasn't it? And I was like, oh, whoops. Oh, that's swell. Yeah, so I ought to say, this professional was just talking about in therapeutic situations, so let me clarify that. And just in really kind of learning sort of moments where it's you know what, I'm going to help you. Yeah, it's not urgent, although it is urgent for the individual, being just tell me what normal is. Just tell me what to do, And I've been in that situation myself as an educator, as a, I suppose, mentor, too. And so, yeah, there are times when it's I'll just tell you, you're really frustrated, or you're, I don't know about getting close to being overstimulated, overwhelmed, and overloaded. I'll tell you. But sometimes I'll say, you know what, for just a few minutes, I'm supposed to just let you figure it out, because that's the respect I can give you, and not just say, well, this is what normal is, do it, and not foster a sort of dependence on other people. It's great to have a network or a system, I suppose that's what some people say, to have your own group, that you can turn to if something's not making any sense. I didn't have that for a while, and I guess I didn't know how to be scared about any of that. I was terribly, confused about everything in college. And I was just telling our father that before I got here, because it's in college, before then, parents had really been telling me, do this, do that, go here, pay attention to this, make certain this is completed. But when I got to college and they weren't around, it's wait a second, so what do I do first? What do I do next? Who am I? Who are you? How did I get here? Which is a Talking Heads reference, I suppose. How did I get here? Letting the days go by. Anyway, so David Burns on the Spectrum. Oh, really? Okay. Don't do that to a literal-minded person. You know, I tell people, because they're kind of, what do you mean? How can be literal-minded being a problem or be a problem? And some people say, like, get out of here. And then I leave. I walk out, and they're like, where are you going? You said get out. So, yeah, so you just got to be careful at certain times. But I tell people I'm doing it out of respect, you know, when I'm teaching. I say, you know what? I'm letting you choose what you believe is normal. I'm letting you trust yourself and be resilient and be resourceful, because you can do this. I know you can do it, you know. But if you're really, really mad, I'll just tell you, you know, because that's how people grow too, when they're just like, just tell me or I'm going to blow up. And it's like, oh, all right, the answer is 2. And they were asking what the color was. Or what's normal, you know, I suppose. Yeah, what it's called. The questions I've been asked about that with normal. You know, is there another question? I was going to keep going, but is there another question at all? I guess I could ask a question. Okay, so with attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, is that, okay. So how is your working memory? Do we all know what that is?
Yeah, what do you explain?
No way, you're the one with that. No, I'm not just going to talk. It's not like John explains everything, right?
Yeah, so I'm a chaplain, so I have conversations all the time, which is difficult sometimes, being able to track what people say. And fortunately, since I'm a medical professional, I can, you know, take notes, and that's very acceptable. So I take notes all the time, in my work especially. So, does that answer?
Yeah, totally. You're all. Yeah. And so something that I had been talking about, because I have a web series and I have 2 podcasts, I suppose. And something that had come up to me, I was talking with an individual who had been recently diagnosed with attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, and object permanence was talked about. And so do we all know what that is, object permanence? You do? Oh, here.
Oh boy, okay. Okay, so it's like, I might get this confused with a different topic, but what I'm pretty sure it's remembering that something exists even though it's not in front of you. So like if you put, it's from developmental psych, and it's when it happens at a certain age with toddlers. I think it's like 6 to 8 months. I was gonna say 8. So like you'll put like a toy, you'll show them a toy, and then you put a blanket over it, and they think the toy doesn't exist anymore, and so they're shocked when you show them that the toy's still there. That's what that is.
Mm-hmm. And so,
Yeah, so that's something my husband really struggles with in terms of cleaning and household chores. Like, he will notice that something needs to be cleaned, and then he turns around and completely forgets about it. So that's something that we've had to navigate for sure, and apparently Sara relates as well.
And so, yeah, in this sort of, I guess when it comes to like prayer and worship and fellowship and all that, do keep that in mind with some individuals. You know, it's like out of sight, out of mind. You know, if they don't see it, like perhaps you only go on Sunday, you know, and so it's one Sunday, and then you leave, and the next Sunday it's like, where are we going? What? You know, and it's not like it's a total mystery, but it's just kind of like, and that happens in relationships too. You know, I suppose it could be like subject permanence, you know, like a person. There can be this kind of coldness and distance if 2 individuals haven't been around one another a bit. Whereas for me, I deal with object impermanence, okay? So for me, it's like when I see something, it's there permanently, you know? It's like, so when I meet a person, like we've met, I'm going to take you to not physically, but you're going to continue with me, you know, here and in here, in the head and the heart, you know, you'll be with me. And so everywhere I go, I'm just ready to share with you all the time, you know. And so some people are just, and who I've known for a long time, it's like, I do believe we're still friends, and they're like, why are you calling me? And I was like, are we not friends anymore? Like, when did that, you didn't tell me that I do apologize, you know, but since you're on the phone, how are you doing? And then they tell me I have terrible boundaries, you know, and that's something that I kind of deal with every once in a while. They're like, you know, I don't want to talk to you. And I was like, I didn't know you didn't want to. You know, I had to find that out. you know, and then I still be like, so are you okay? And they're like, I don't want to talk to you. And I was like, oh, I'll let you go then. Whoops, you know. And I think that's a human thing, but it happens to me quite a bit. And so perhaps individuals on the spectrum, you know, like, repetitive behavior. So like coming to, you know, this place and being in this place and worshiping, you know, together and being together every Sunday at a certain time, you know, that's probably something that's very, very comforting, you know, where it's like, this is going to happen on this day for this long, you know, and then they make certain that it's going to happen. And that's how it was for me. You know, I would be like, okay, this is what we're going to be doing now, you know, and it was really, I suppose, I was reassured by it or comforted. Any other questions? Shall I go first? Since
And how did that affect? You know what I mean?
the dynamic or something?
Okay. Yeah, I got 3 younger brothers. So you're asking how having siblings affects me?
If it's a complicated thing when one of the 3 or 4 children is
Yeah.
typical,
So,
everybody has to go along with the family.
yeah.
You know what
Yeah. So I have 3 younger brothers and 3 dogs, and so my house is kind of a circus, which presents challenges to me when I am just done and I need to have my own quiet space. So I guess, yeah, it does have its challenges, but my brothers just kind of, they just are like, oh, that's Hadlie, sometimes she needs space, and it's not anything personal. I think what my parents have done, especially my mom, really well is I have my own bedroom, creating my own space for me to just calm down. And like my brothers get, you know, if I am not hanging out with them, it's because I need to recharge, because I am going to like explode if I don't have a second by myself. Like when I come home from college, I come home every couple of weeks because I need that break. And I'm basically in my room the whole time. And so they understand, you know, I'm happy to see them. And so I make sure to tell them like, hi, I missed you, but I'm going to go sleep now. If that answered your question, at least a little bit.
I have an older sister, and she's 10 years older, so we didn't really grow up at the same time, but we are now realizing as adults that we had very similar experiences when we were kids, but yeah.
So I've got an older sister, an older brother, and then there's me, and then there's a younger brother, and so there's quite a few of us, and they... So I was diagnosed at 30 with autism spectrum, Asperger's syndrome, and we have been talking about that. Now that was folded into autism spectrum disorder, so now I just say autism spectrum disorder, although I still call myself an Aspie. Yeah. And they, our older brother did tell me, it's like, I knew you 30 years as one person, you know, and I started to go through the therapy and I started doing the work, you know, to become a much more... And I tell people this, do not fit in, okay? Do not fit in, fill out, okay? That's what you ought to do. And so that's what I was doing. I was filling out a lot of forms, definitely. Every time I'd be doing the work, they'd be like, you know, yes, no, do you feel like you can't sleep? And it's like, I don't know how to feel things. I'll just put yes, no, I'll put no. So our older brother had said, it's like, I knew you for 30 years as one person, and now you're totally different, you know, and I don't know how to relate to that. And friends had said, close friends, I suppose, there's a kind of scared. I didn't know who you were anymore, you know, and that was like, I'd been living 30 years in an alternate dimension. That's what I tell people, in a parallel universe. Nothing was being explained to me in another country, in a foreign country, you know, and I didn't know the customs. I didn't know the rituals. I just went along with everything. And I was described as this bubble, like this, like in The Wizard of Oz, Glinda arrives in a bubble. It was like, that's what I was just this bubble that floated around. So, yeah, and they sort of didn't believe that I had or do have autism spectrum disorder. And so they were sort of in denial about it. And I'm not certain if they still are, but they thought that they could just kind of ignore it and kind of just lead me to just be normal. And it's like, but they weren't being clear about what they were doing. They weren't, and so it's kind of like they're just doing things. And it's like, why are you doing this? And then they get mad if I'd ask questions, or I guess frustrated. So the dynamic was kind of complicated. Isn't that true of all families? I do apologize. That borders on stupidity, saying that. It's like, I don't believe I'm stupid. It's just kind of like, all families are complicated, or my family's complicated. It's like, or incredibly naive, which is something I do attempt to remain all the time. Because I'm not supposed to know some things, So I walk around and I'm like, well, what is that? And people explain it to me, and they're like, you don't know about this? I was like, well, yeah, I do. You can just explain it to me, though. So is that helping, hearing that? And it's still kind of, it's rough. It's really rough. And it's supposed to be, okay? It's supposed to be tough. Okay. Yeah, please do that. And it's not like instant acceptance. It's not like a Hallmark film, okay? It's they get mad at me, and they're still mad at me for things, and they think I do things on purpose. And this brain is doing things on purpose, and you have to, and they won't have a conversation about it, but sometimes they will, and they just, what? They have the right to not care, okay? If we're supposed to be accepted for being different, all right, we have to offer them that grace too. We have to say, okay, I accept you for not wanting to hear about this, Now I do have rights, I do, but I don't have to talk about this with you. If you say I don't want to talk about it, I don't have to like march and say you have to constantly talk about me being different all the time. No, it's like that's not fair to them. Yeah, so that's what I tell them. We'll talk about it when we're supposed to, which could be never. So I do hope that doesn't hopefully that's in alignment with kind of the experiences that fellow presenters have had. And so I'm thinking of something, I don't know how much time that's what time it is. Wrap it up? Because there's one topic, I had a mother ask me, it's like, how do I get my child to stop playing video games? How do I get see, there we go. So I do believe I ought to say that. We have to go worship, or we have to go to, Wow.
Just what you said.
Yep.
He cannot clean. He turns. He misses things.
Yep.
He cannot focus on work. He cannot do. When you sit him down in front of an Xbox, and he can be playing 6 hours without breathing or blinking.
Yep.
Yep. And I don't understand it. Is that the alternate dimension that you're talking about?
And so, yeah, for me, and so was there more? I do apologize. I was about to start to answer. Okay. So I'll since I brought it up, I'll just talk a little bit. So this mother is like, how do I get my child to stop? Because there's school going on. He needs to stop playing the video game. We're going to go, and worship or something like that. Or, we're going to go to church. He needs to get off of that. And I can't get him away from it. And I said, well, imagine you are from a foreign country, okay? And you're put in this one. But a video game starts speaking your language. You're going to spend a lot of time with that video game, because it totally makes sense, okay? Whereas everything else doesn't, And so that's what I told her. It's that not so much that you have to start making sense, You don't need to be a video game to your child, but just keep that in mind, and maybe regulate it in a certain way and treat it like, okay, this is, I don't know about a friend, but it's like something you really, really understand. And it's like, okay, I get that. So you're going to have that time when we get back. You're going to have 2 hours, but we need to go do this for an hour, and then it's yours again. And that's what I told her, because it just makes sense. And that's what happened to me. I tried to understand. I was talking about this a little earlier, and I'm pointing over there, because I had thought movies. For me, it was movies. I would watch movies, and I guess I'd be immersed and absorbed, but I thought all movies were instructional. Okay? So I watched Ghostbusters. I was saying that. I watched Ghostbusters, and I thought that's what I'd be doing. I thought I was going to be catching ghosts. And I watched The Time Machine, Howard the Duck. But yeah, so I thought that was going to be happening, and that's what I was into. And our family, that's sort of what our father did with me. He would be like, okay, you can watch it, but we have to go do this. So he would, set, I suppose, those limits, and just make everything really clear for me, So it wasn't kind of like, well, when, because I didn't understand like time, how time passes for me. I don't know how to want things. So it's like, it passes differently for me than for other individuals. Oh. Oh, sure, here.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's a really good way to engage in like being in that other country and being able to speak that language could be really helpful. Another thing, speaking of the timers I was referencing earlier, there are some visual ones that have like a green light, yellow light, and red light, and setting limits that way. I saw on TikTok a mom who does that with her kids, like, okay, you can play it, but we're setting this timer for this amount of time, and then it tells you how much time you have left of doing that.
Yeah, I think in terms of connection, I've mentioned Glennon, and that's how my mom and I connect a lot too. Is I'll be like, okay, this is me, and then she'll like listen to it or read it, and she's like, okay, now I get it. Or like my hyperfixation is like, well, brains, or like when I was younger more, it was like books or like dollhouses, and so if you would sit with me and like play with the dollhouse, that would be like a connection because you'd step into my world. So I think that's also something you can do with your kids too, is like just explore their world instead of trying to pull them out into yours. At least first, because eventually you do have to kind of go through life steps, but if you can have someone who's willing to step into your own world, I think that creates connection.
Temple Grandin. Okay, so Temple Grandin had said to me, she had said, with kids, like what she believes is important, okay, is immersion, interest, and mentoring. So immerse the child in something, all right? If there's an interest, follow that, and like mentor or guide through that, and just let it grow. Let it grow. So yeah, totally. If playing, like immerse in a certain type of video game or movie or activity, and that can lead to life skills too. Like jobs, like if there's an interest, and then find someone to mentor. So that just happens. So thank you so much.
Thank you. All three of you, this was incredible, and I am so grateful for your words and your stories and your presence here with us. As you are headed out, if you want to write a little response on those response cards and you want to put that in the big yellow bin, go right ahead. Otherwise, take your stuff with you. Thank you all for being here. Have a wonderful night.